We all see the headlines coming out of Saudi Arabia, don't we? You know, the massive wealth, these really ambitious projects, lots of talk about reform.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what's really going on beneath that very, very carefully managed image? That's what we want to explore today.
Exactly. We're going to, well, try and dig a bit deeper into some of the, let's say, less publicized aspects of the House of Saud, maybe some more unsettling things.
Mm.
We're drawing on various articles and reports here, trying to peel back some layers, look at the controversies, the secrets that, don't always make the front page.
Okay, great. So maybe the place to start is, well, the beginning. This immense power didn't just appear out of nowhere, did it? There's a long history here.
Oh, definitely not overnight. The roots of the House of Saud, they stretch back to the 18th century, though their influence has sort of waxed and waned over time.
Right.
But the kingdom, as we recognize it today, that really came together in 1932, unified by King Abdulaziz ibn Saud. And what's really key is how he established the foundation for absolute rule. It's partly about, smart tribal alliances, but also, very importantly, establishing religious legitimacy.
And that religious angle, that ties into the alliance with the Wahhabi movement, doesn't it? That wasn't just like a side deal.
No, not at all. That pact was absolutely fundamental. Wahhabism started as this very puritanical Islamic reform movement.
Mm.
And this alliance basically forged a theocratic state. Religion and political power became, well, deeply intertwined.
Okay.
Now, this is where it gets complicated and, frankly, quite controversial,
Yeah.
according to some analyses.
Oh, so?
Well, the argument is that certain interpretations, certain strands within Wahhabism have been linked, sometimes indirectly, sometimes maybe more directly, to the rise of radical ideologies.
Yeah.
The kind that feed into narratives around global terrorism.
That's a heavy implication. And it sits strangely alongside this image of just incredible wealth, doesn't it? We hear figures like trillions in assets, maybe 15,000 royals.
It is a stark contrast. The scale of the wealth is just, well, staggering, really. And yes, it allows for these incredibly lavish lifestyles. We read about the super yachts, the gold-plated cars, huge estates all over the world.
Yeah.
But running alongside that, almost inseparable from it in many reports, are these persistent allegations of widespread corruption.
Right. Allegations about embezzlement, siphoning off oil money for personal gain. It's a very different narrative from the official one. How does that even work, potentially?
Well, pinning down specifics is obviously incredibly difficult given the lack of transparency.
Yeah, sure.
But the way the state is structured, with so much power concentrated at the top and, limited checks and balances compared to democratic systems, it creates an environment where these kinds of allegations can thrive and persist. The kind of accountability mechanisms you might expect elsewhere just aren't as strong. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the real impact of all this alleged corruption on the average Saudi citizen?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Because you have this immense wealth concentrated in relatively few hands, but reports also consistently point to, well, significant economic challenges for many others.
Absolutely. Despite being one of the world's richest countries in terms of oil, a substantial part of the Saudi population reportedly struggles. We hear about poverty, problems with housing, sometimes limited access to good health care or education. It's a real paradox.
And that leads us into another really difficult area, human rights. It seems like speaking out, criticizing the regime, that comes with enormous risks.
Yes. Sadly, the suppression of dissent is a theme that comes up again and again in the sources we looked at. Anyone seen as critical activists, journalists, academics, even clerics who don't toe the official line, they risk serious consequences. Imprisonment, often reports of torture, and in the most extreme cases, even execution.
The Jamal Khashoggi murder in 2018, that just brought it home in such a brutal, visceral way for the whole world.
It really did. What made the Khashoggi case so shocking, so globally resonant, wasn't just the, sheer brutality of it inside a consulate.
Right.
It was the credible evidence pointing towards the involvement of very high-ranking Saudi officials. Reports directly implicated Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. It became this horrifying example of just how far the state might go to silence someone perceived as an enemy, even abroad.
No, on the flip side, we have seen some changes, particularly regarding women. The ban on driving was lifted, for example.
Yeah.
How significant are those reforms? Are they fundamental shifts?
That's a good question. Look, the reforms allowing women to drive, to participate more visibly in public life, those are definitely notable changes, things that were unthinkable not long ago.
Yeah.
But it's important not to overstate it, perhaps. You have to look at the bigger picture. Major restrictions are still in place, especially because of the male guardianship system.
Explain that a bit.
Well, essentially it means women still need permission from a male relative, a father, husband, brother, sometimes even a son for major life decisions. Things like getting married, traveling abroad, sometimes accessing certain health care.
So progress, but within strict limits.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And then there's another massive human rights issue. The situation for millions of migrant workers under what's called the kafala system.
Right, the sponsorship system.
Exactly. It ties a worker's legal status directly to their employer. This gives the employer huge power, and unfortunately, human rights groups say it leads to widespread exploitation, unpaid wages, confiscated passports, terrible working conditions. Some have even likened it to modern slavery.
Wow. That's deeply concerning. It seems like it's not just external critics or internal dissenters causing friction. There are tensions within the royal family itself, right? It's not monolithic.
Oh, absolutely not. That's a very sharp point. The House of Saud is enormous, thousands of members, different branches, different lineages. And historically, there have always been rivalries, jockeying for power and influence between these factions. Sometimes it spills out into the open.
Like the Ritz-Carlton episode.
Precisely. That 2017 crackdown was extraordinary. MBS consolidated his power by detaining hundreds of prominent figures, princes, ministers, businessmen in the Riyadh Ritz-Carlton Hotel.
Right.
Officially, it was an anti-corruption drive, but many observers saw it as a, well, pretty ruthless power play to remove potential rivals and centralize control under him.
It sounds almost like something from a movie, detaining rivals in a luxury hotel. And what about royals who've left the country? Those in exile?
Yes, there are figures, members of the family, who live abroad now and are quite outspoken critics. They often raise issues like corruption, human rights abuses.
Do they have much impact?
It's debatable. They certainly face risks, potential threats, and their ability to genuinely influence things back inside the kingdom from exile, well, that's pretty limited, most likely.
Okay, shifting gears a bit to the global stage. Saudi Arabia's oil wealth obviously gives it huge geopolitical clout.
Undeniable. Being one of the world's top oil producers gives them massive leverage. They can and have influenced global energy markets, which in turn affects economies and politics worldwide. Adjusting oil production levels is a powerful tool.
And then there's that really thorny issue we touched on earlier, that the alleged funding of extremist ideologies globally, the government denies it, but the accusations persist.
It's incredibly contentious. The official line is a firm denial of any state support for terrorism, but critics consistently point to decades of funding for certain Wahhabi institutions, mosques, schools, charities around the world. The argument isn't always that they intended to fund violence, but that specific ultra-conservative interpretations promoted by these institutions have, unfortunately, been linked to extremist groups.
Right.
You often hear references to leaked documents or intelligence reports in these discussions, though again, the Saudi government disputes their validity or interpretation. It's very complex, very murky.
And another major international issue has been the war in Yemen. That intervention has drawn widespread criticism.
Yes, the Saudi-led military intervention in Yemen has led to what the UN consistently calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
Just devastating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thousands upon thousands of civilian deaths, many from coalition airstrikes, widespread famine, cholera outbreaks. It's a catastrophe. And Saudi Arabia says sees serious accusations of potential war crimes from international human rights organizations.
Bringing it back inside the kingdom, how does the government manage information, control the narrative?
With a very tight grip.
Right.
State control over the media is extensive. Censorship is the norm. Critical voices are systematically suppressed. There's a huge effort, especially under MBS, to project this specific image of modernization, progress, openness.
That's like the Vision 2030 plan?
Exactly. And alongside traditional censorship, there are numerous reports about the use of sophisticated digital tools. Cyber espionage, spyware allegedly used to monitor dissidents, activists, journalists, both inside Saudi Arabia and even those living abroad.
So this Vision 2030, the big economic and social reform plan under MBS, it sounds ambitious, but how's it viewed? Is it genuine transformation or something else?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it? The goals are certainly ambitious, diversifying the economy away from oil, modernizing society.
Right.
And some observers do see it as a genuine, necessary push towards reform, opening up the country, creating opportunities.
Right.
But others are much more skeptical. They argue it's partly a PR exercise, way to improve the kingdom's image internationally and consolidate MBS's own power, while the fundamental structures of repression, remain largely intact. A facade, essentially.
And introducing things like cinemas, concerts, big entertainment events that must clash with the deep-seated religious conservatism.
Oh, absolutely. It creates significant tension. For decades, that kind of entertainment was strictly forbidden under the prevailing religious influence. So bringing it in so rapidly, alongside promoting tourism, it's a huge cultural shift. And it definitely creates friction and unease among more conservative segments of society. It raises big questions about the long-term social fabric.
Despite all these controversies, Khashoggi, Yemen, human rights concerns, major Western powers still seem to maintain pretty close ties, especially selling arms.
That really highlights a central tension in international relations, doesn't it?
It seems so.
You have countries like the US, the UK, France, expressing concern about human rights on one hand, but continuing multi-billion-dollar arms deals with Saudi Arabia on the other.
Why?
Well, it's a complex mix. Strategic alliances, regional stability concerns or perceptions of it, counterterrorism cooperation, and of course, huge economic interest. Jobs tied to those arms sales, Saudi investments.
Right.
So while incidents like Khashoggi's murder or the horrors in Yemen do cause strain, maybe lead to some temporary condemnations or pauses. Often it seems those strategic and economic factors tend to win out in the long run.
So wrapping this up, after digging into these different reports and analyses, what's the main takeaway? It feels like a picture full of contradictions.
I think that's exactly it. The key takeaway is probably the stark contrast. You have this immense power, this almost unimaginable wealth, this projection of control and modernization. And right alongside it, beneath that surface, you have persistent issues. Serious human rights abuses, allegations of corruption, internal power struggles, controversial foreign interventions, and the suppression of dissent. The public image is carefully managed. But these underlying tensions and, well, secrets are very much part of the reality.
It really makes you think. Considering Saudi Arabia's global influence, its economic weight, its role in energy markets, what are the wider implications of these darker aspects we've talked about? It certainly leaves you pondering the complex ethics of global politics and how nations balance values against interests.